Hello and welcome to our Salesforce United episode, a podcast about Salesforce and people who work with it. Here we discuss engineering discoveries, professional secrets, and careers of our guests. I am 𝐒𝐚𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐜, a Salesforce enthusiast, and to my delight, your host.
Dear listeners and guests, welcome to our podcast. In this episode, we aim to dive into the world of Salesforce and provide our audience with valuable insights from the industry's best experts and professionals. I'm Olga Dmitrieva, a Salesforce software testing engineer and your host.
Today we welcome Yarin Boland, a seasoned Salesforce delivery manager with over 15 years of trailblazing success in the tech industry. Yarin's journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. He's worn many hats from project lead to functional consultant and has left his mark in various companies. With a remarkable track record of managing projects of all sizes, from small-scale giants to colossal undertakings involving big cross-functional teams. Today we're in for a treat as we delve into his story, incredible journey, and invaluable insights into the world of Salesforce. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hello!
Hey guys!
So, let's start with the first question, which would be to hear more about your journey into project management and how did you first become interested in this field? What drew you to pursue this career?
Actually, my story is a little bit different. I never, as a kid, dreamt of a career in IT, to be honest. IT in the Netherlands, where I come from, is not exactly what you would call, a pants dropper. So it's considered relatively boring and, a little bit of a weird first master, which was, I think it translates as Russian studies, which is basically a language study. And when I finished that, this was basically around the time when the global financial crisis broke out. And after the contract that I was having with, I was doing something with one of the biggest wind turbine blade manufacturers in the world as a project management officer or PMO. But it was on a temporary basis, and due to the financial crisis, they didn't extend my contract. I found it really hard to find a decent job until after basically half a year of being unemployed, I found a traineeship, which was basically a traineeship sponsored by the Dutch government, and the idea was to educate a class of 15 people per year into becoming IT experts in the public domain. A big component of that was that we were doing another master in this field. So basically the master was called Public Information Management, I think. I've done that traineeship, immediately understanding that the public domain is not my domain. That was a little bit of a letdown. On the other hand, the second studies was actually very interesting. However, still, having two masters, really difficult to find something at that point in time. But finally, I found another PMO position at a mid-sized IT service provider in the Netherlands. But basically, this service provider had very few contracts or very few business, very few assignments. So we were basically sitting there doing nothing, until one guy proposed to set up a Salesforce practice within this company, and he was looking for volunteers. So I was one of the 10 volunteers. From that point onwards, we were supposed to get our Salesforce admin certification. And in all fairness, I basically Googled all the answers to the question that were posed during this exam, passed the exam. And from that point of time, I was a certified Salesforce professional. And when I put this on my LinkedIn, so imagine you have gone through, 10 years of university, and nobody wants to hire you. And then you more or less well, I would say almost cheat on an exam for Salesforce, which is back then was a $200 exam, if I'm not mistaken. And you put that on your LinkedIn, and all of a sudden you're in high demand. I thought that was quite insane, to be honest. To basically, it could have skipped 8 years of university, just watch 1 or 2 tutorials of how to become a Salesforce administrator, and it would have saved me quite a lot of time, I think. But this is how I rolled into Salesforce. The rest is probably history.
Yeah, or a destiny, for example. But that was really interesting to listen to your story. And could you please explain the role of a project manager in a Salesforce project context?
In my opinion, there's basically 3 sides to this. You have your role within the team, or how do you say, the people that work in your Scrum team to deliver the backlog that has been how do you say, given to you, usually by a PO, but one way or another by the client. Then there's the communication part, where you're basically discussing everything with the client stakeholders. And here I feel that the role is mostly that of communicator. I would also say protector of the teams, to shield them from a lot of noise and a lot of fuss that happens in every project. And then I guess you also have your internal stakeholders, so management levels above you in the internal organization, which also requires a lot of communication, but also a separate set of deliverables, or a separate set of requirements from you in order to do your job well. What can I say? The last one is usually the one that I find the more tedious one, because it is quite a little bit of politics, and there's quite a lot of questions to answer that sometimes are not that black and white. In working with the team, this is the part that I love best. It is usually just, how do you say, cooperation. I try to build teams in such a way that people get along. This doesn't always happen, but in general it does. Try to make sure that everybody feels safe, comfortable, and appreciated. And my role here is, in general, relatively limited, other than, well, in fact, you're a facilitator, right? You're basically making sure that everybody can do their job, that they, as I said, feel appreciated, that they can grow. The rest they can do themselves. In general, if you have a team with how do you say, subpar skilled professionals, it's always going to be problematic to reach a result in IT, I would say. So a lot of this is definitely down on how good the people are that you work with. But once they have their processes or their working processes in place, and they know what is expected from them, then there is very little that needs to be done there. Although I do feel that a daily call is a very important call, where you have possibility to get everybody on the same page and understand what the latest issues and blockers are. But other than that, that's the beauty of Agile, right? They're managing teams. They understand much better what they need to do than I do. So I would say, as soon as I can, remove myself from the technical process. And the reason why I think I became a project manager is because of the second part with the client stakeholders. And again, here what I try to do is always to make sure that the team can do their work in a proper way. Don't get bothered by the client too much, or by the client's politics, etc., etc. That is for me. So I communicate, I talk, I flirt, I convince, I wouldn't say I manipulate, but one way or another way, always making sure that the client feels happy, or feels listened to, feels that their problems are in good hands with us, and make sure that that you communicate problems in a timely manner, but also never forget to communicate your successes, because this is also important. And the third part, this is in every company, right? There's certain goals, there's certain targets, there's certain margins, there's all these kind of things that you need to answer to. But I would say in my current role, I'm not budget responsible. So most of these things are relatively passing by my desk to somebody else, which is something that I like. Although, obviously, this is the direction in which I need to grow, and it's also something that I used to do for my previous employer. So I can do that, but it's the part of the job that I like the least.
We are curious about the day-to-day experiences of a Salesforce project manager. Can you walk us through what a typical day looks like in your role?
Most what I'm doing is, well, it depends on the phase in the project, obviously. But if we are in the building phase, then in general, what I start my day with is a daily. Then follow up on emails, and then it's usually calls, talking. I would say that, especially with my current employer, a lot comes down to how you communicate. To communication, basically.
Okay, and now let's talk a little bit about challenges. Could you please tell us about the challenges you have faced while working on Salesforce projects, and what steps did you take to tackle those challenges?
Well, challenges in Salesforce project, as I said, it's quite a general question, because it's one of the things a project manager does, right, is troubleshoot, is making sure that issues or problems get resolved quickly, so that the team can work on can do their job, basically work on their functionality, or their coding, or their testing, whatever. So there's always these kind of things. What can I say? It also depends quite a little bit about the setup of the project, and whether it is a fixed price project or whether it is a time and material project. It can rely or depend on certain resources, but well, what can I say? I would say that normally agile methodology would dictate that the client has a PO. It's quite difficult to understand the wishes of the client if there's nobody to prioritize your backlog, if there's nobody who can give you feedback on what you're doing. That sometimes is problematic. I must say that I see agile methodology, well, not always implemented to the letter of the theory, which makes sense, I must say. But not having a PO is sometimes rather hard, because it means that very much you're relying on either yourself to go get the priorities from the clients. So you basically ask other stakeholders, or it comes down to the business analysts who have to do the interviews or have to communicate within the client organization quite well, in order to make sure that they have a feeling of where the main priorities for the project or for the client are. That is a problem sometimes. Working in project is people's work, right? So you always have to deal with different characters, and it is true that not everybody is very good at that, or is able to play along, so to speak, or sometimes the character of the group is something that people don't feel comfortable with. This is happening sometimes. This can be problematic, or this is obviously problematic. What I usually try to do is, because this is usually not something that happens with half of the team, it's usually one or two who just don't fit in, or what very often happens is that they are also often lacking certain skills, and I'm talking about hard skills here, not per se about soft skills. Puts them in a difficult position. So what I usually try to do is coach. So I try to get regular one-on-ones with a person like that, discuss potential improvement paths. Basically, what you first need to discuss is where, in your opinion, the problem is. Listen to the feedback. So it could also be that there's many other reasons for this, right? So first I would like to understand a little bit more about the person itself, like to understand a little bit more about the background, like to understand whether he or she also perceives his or her role in the team as problematic or as not really garnering the respected results, then looking for the origins of that, and then try to discuss with somebody how we can improve this. This is not per se a bulletproof approach, in all honesty. It very much depends on the issue at hand. It very much depends on the person in question, and sometimes it means that we come to the conclusion that it is better if we find a replacement for this person. But for me, this is always the thing that I would, like to. It should be the last resort. In general, as I said before, I feel it is my responsibility to make sure that there's a working climate for everyone, and that everybody should feel safe and appreciated. But it is true that sometimes some individuals don't have the skill set that the rest of the team has, and this person then usually becomes a little bit isolated, because other team members, I would not say ignore him or her, but if they need a quick answer, would ask it to somebody else. If they need something to done properly, they will discuss it or ask it to somebody else. It is difficult to make this person fit in if he or she is not willing to do the actual work, or if they are just not smart enough, because this also happens. But in general, I must say that I actually only have one occasion where this has happened in about 4 years. So that is, I would say, a good average. But still, for me, it feels like defeat if there's somebody in my team that, in the end, we can't continue with. So I take that quite personal.
And now to more specific question, I guess, back to Salesforce. The Salesforce ecosystem is known for its vast capabilities and resources. And what are some benefits of working with it that can come to your mind?
Actually interesting. One of my previous employers, he was working for, I think it was Deloitte in the Netherlands, and that was before he decided to set up his own business. And what he said is, we started a new company solely for Salesforce implementations. And we did that because when we compared those to, for instance, Siebel or SAP implementations, the Salesforce implementations were always successful or had a much higher success rate than one of the other CRM implementation. And I thought about this, and this is exactly what I've seen as well. Salesforce is, I would say, quite an easy configurable CRM. It is cloud-based, which I think is also an advantage. And as I said, it's very relatively easily configurable. The Salesforce ecosystem is expanding and expanding and expanding. And I was always afraid when I started working on this that, this is probably going to be just the new technology on the block. In 10 years, it will be surpassed by something newer, something better, etc. But I've been doing this now for over 10 years, or working in the Salesforce ecosystem, and it's still around, and I think it's still the number one CRM system in the world currently. benefits for me as a professional, and by the way, for you both as well, is that it's still in high demand. It's very popular. It is, how do you say? I started the interview more or less by explaining how I rolled into it and what kind of impact it can have on a personal career. As a professional, you probably have the same, that I get, about one job offer per day from competitors. And at a certain point, a few years back, when I was still a consultant or a BA, I think it was about two per day. Just invites for interviews, to join other companies, to think about changing jobs, headhunters who want to represent you, all these kind of things. I only have, 5 or 6 certs. I can imagine if you have the more technical certifications. I mean, as a developer, I can imagine that you get about 5 of these letters per day, if not more. So it is a perfect platform to build your career on. I would say, I would actually say that I'm the living example of that. So that is something that is very interesting. The other thing is, since it's cloud-based, this means that that projects or Salesforce projects are usually all you need as a professional is a laptop and an internet connection, right? You can work from wherever you are. You can work with whomever you want. You're very, very flexible, and it allows you to, I would say, get in touch with people from different cultures. It allows you to get in touch with a whole variety of clients from all over the globe. It allows you to relocate if necessary, I would say, if the project is interesting enough. You can basically build your whole life and your whole career on Salesforce, and I would say that is one of the major benefits. From a project perspective, we've actually seen it during COVID years, right? I think that a lot of projects where people needed to be physically present somewhere, and this usually does, I can imagine that this goes for IT projects that are not cloud-based, but also can consider people working in construction or something, or in all kinds of different types of branches. If you were not able to meet, then sometimes perhaps the project would be delayed or would be cancelled, etc., etc. Since all we need is the laptop and the internet connection, we could still work on. You don't have to physically meet somebody or be in the same room with somebody in order to do your work. I would say that is actually very good and very nice, and for me as a project manager, obviously very convenient, because if you are relying on people to meet you face to face, there were definitely about 2 years where this was not possible. And if there's no work or no contractors, then there's no work, and that is usually not very good for one's career. So also from a project perspective, Salesforce is ideal, I would say.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for sharing your insights. And I think that our listeners would like to find out your opinion about the skills that are becoming increasingly important in the sphere of project management. So what do you think? What are the most important skills one should possess to be a good project manager?
It depends, I guess. It also depends what kind of project manager you want to be. So for me, in order to do my job in such a way that I feel comfortable, is usually something, I would say, the one basic thing I think every professional needs not per se a project manager, but is the human aspect. We should never forget that in the end we're all human beings and we're just trying to get a job done. That doesn't have to be by using a hierarchical structure. You can just be a horizontal organization, in my opinion, where it is clear that people have a certain role within the project, and you expect them obviously to perform this role. And in the end, it's fine that the project manager takes a certain amount of responsibility. So the first quality, in my opinion, is just being human, and being a cooperative, nice person who is there to make a success with people, not at the expense of people. And then the other thing, it would be very nice to understand a thing or two about agile methodology, but in general, agile methodology, or the Scrum Guide, is, I think, a 14-page booklet, so that is not a very difficult thing to learn. The other, so that's from a technical perspective, I would say. But the other thing is what I see myself doing, and I've told you this before. I basically communicate, and communication can go on all kinds of levels. Sometimes it's important to have a one-on-one with each and every one of your team, just to temperature a little bit how they are doing, how they are feeling, how they're really feeling, because very often people come with a game face on. But to understand how they're really feeling, whether they're happy. Then again, you also need to communicate with clients, giving them clear feedback on what we can and cannot do, and the reasons why. And very often you need to sugarcoat this a little bit, especially if the news is negative, or when it's bad news. And then, well, there's obviously other stakeholders that I mentioned earlier in this podcast as well. But my overall feeling is that as long as everybody is on the same page, and this is where I feel that I'm responsible for, as long as everybody is on the same page, it is not rocket science. And then everybody has a role to play. This is fine. But I need to make sure that the information from the client gets to the team, and vice versa, gets from management to the team, and vice versa. So I would say that communication is my major skill, the most important one. Apart from that, obviously, you need to be clear to your team what you expect, but usually you only have to say this once. You need to be clear to the people, to your stakeholders, what they can expect, and inform them whether you're going to meet the deadlines, etc. All the technical stuff is done by the development team, not by me. I don't need to be a Salesforce subject matter expert.
Thank you for this answer. And for those who are just starting their career as a project manager, what advice would you give them? Perhaps there was a valuable lesson you learned early in your career that you wish someone had told you.
In all fairness, sure. When I got my Salesforce admin, this must have been over 10 years ago, right? The market probably wasn't the same as it is currently. But what I've told before is that I noticed how much these certificates are worth. Back then, however, the whole Trailblazer portal was not operational. I would say that there is, and this is one of the things that I find very cool about Salesforce, is that you can actually learn online all there is to know about it, get hands-on experience. And I see these days also that people post their rank, their Trailblazer rank on their LinkedIn or on their resumes, because it gives an idea of how much time people have spent working with within the ecosystem with Salesforce technology. So it makes sense. What I do think is that usually when these days the admin certification is just entry. Back in the day, it was quite a bit where people were setting up their Salesforce practices. So if you had one certification, it was already a plus. But my guess is that these days you may need more or hands-on experience, but one usually comes after the other. What it basically also depends on the approach you want to, or how to say, in which way you want to develop your career. If you want to be a developer, I don't think it makes much sense to learn or get your Salesforce consultant, your Service Cloud consultant certification, or your Sales Cloud consultant certification. So this was basically my career path. I figured that. It was my role back in the day to be a BA, so I figured the more of these kind of certification I have, the better it is. But it does obviously help to get hands-on experience, and I don't think everybody who says, or every potential employer who says minimum 5 years of work experience is what they are gonna get always. I think in general it's also just something that their ideal candidate would look like. I think that if you have 1 or 2 certs and maybe a year of working experience in I don't know, maybe a QA role, or in a BA role, or just on the sideline of Salesforce and having a good understanding of the system itself, should already be, how do you say, should definitely be a plus in obtaining a Salesforce role. I don't think, or at least back in the days when it comes to project management, there were not really these kind of certifications. I think they're changing that a little bit now, that you can actually have, that there's more client-based roles currently than the, how do you say, than the purely technical certifications. Anyway, I never took an exam in becoming a Salesforce project manager. There just is none. Or there never was one. My guess is that in general, this also makes sense, because to a large extent, one can rely on the knowledge of the team members. Most important thing is that you like to work with people, and you communicate. This is something that I would say you don't really get a training for, or there's not really a study for that. Then again, it's also not rocket science. I keep repeating this, because project management is not rocket science. It's very elemental way of just making sure that people work together. Most of the project managers I've come across in my time never knew anything about Salesforce, never had worked in a Salesforce role before, but what they did know was how to organize and how to communicate. So if you have if you can show that you also have more in-depth knowledge of the Salesforce ecosystem, then that is definitely a plus.
Okay, it's a very interesting point of view. And you've mentioned that the lion's share of your work is devoted to communication. And communication requires a lot of efforts. And I would like to ask you a question. How do you personally cope when you feel overwhelmed or find yourself underperforming? So do you use any strategies or techniques or mindset shifts that help you to overcome these situations? Yoga, dancing?
No, I don't really feel overwhelmed. What I sometimes when the workload is huge, what I usually do is I work more hours. If that doesn't work, then it is time to communicate that to the people that are responsible for me. So usually, I try to avoid this from happening, but sometimes you have to be honest with yourself. Very often what helps for me, if I feel that I'm faced with a problem where I don't know the answer to, what I very often do is discuss this with my manager. And he coaches me quite a bit in if I'm struggling with something, he advises me. And if there's no advice, he also drinks a cup of coffee with me just to calm me down if necessary. But No, if I feel overwhelmed, usually I fix it myself. If I can't, then usually there's somebody close to me that can help me and put things into perspective or come up with advice. And it's the essence of everything. I would say you need to make sure that everybody's on the same page. If I'm struggling or being overwhelmed, then nobody can, people can't smell that of you, especially since we're working remotely very often. If we don't use cameras because of lack of bandwidth or something, they can hear it in your voice or whatever. But in general, if you don't tell that you're running into issues, people will not know. But then again, as I said, I would always look for the issue with myself first and see if I can do a better job. So basically, whether the issue is self-induced or whether it is external factors. If it's self-induced, then the solution is also within me. If it's external factors, then it makes sense to see what you can do about the external factors, or highlight to the above if you understand that you can't do anything about the external factors, that you need support. I expect this from my team members as well, and I think it's common sense mostly.
It's a question that we always ask our guests because we strongly believe that behind each great professional there is a great human being with its tastes, and that's why we would like to ask you, what is your favorite book, film, and song?
But I find this the hardest question of the day, and the reason for that is that the things you're asking for, book, music, and film, there's such a vast amount of material there, created by such talented people. But I thought about this a little bit, and I'm gonna go for best movie, Shawshank Redemption, I think. I know it is, it is always in the top of many lists, but it's just a beautiful movie, I guess. And my favorite book would be The Master and Margaret, or Margarita. Brilliant book, hilarious. I think there's also many, there's many idioms or many expressions that come from this book, but it's just awesome. And best song, I really like Sitting by the Dock of the Bay. It's originally from Otis Redding, if I'm not wrong, but I like the version that Pearl Jam did in a live concert, which is pretty special. And I think the acoustic version of Everlong by Foo Fighters is pretty special. But honestly, guys, I could also have said Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses. Anyway, if it's relatively rocky, if it has good riffs, good rhythm, and good lyrics, then usually I'm very much in favor of it.
Hope our guests will enjoy this talk with such an interesting, super positive and caring about the team person as you, Yarin.
Thank you so much. You're too kind. And thank you so much for the possibility of sharing my thoughts on work. It was, I hope it wasn't too deep at points or too shallow in others, but I really enjoyed it. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
For us, and thank you, dear listeners. As always, you can leave reactions, and we always welcome feedback. If you'd like to become our next guest, reach out to me or Olga in the social media on LinkedIn. And that's it. That's the episode. Bye.